Welcome back to The Factor. Now I'm talking to Mr. Brannon Bruder, Country Director, Peace Corps Guyana, coming out from the United States. You've been in Guyana here over 2 years, or just about 2 years. You were telling me earlier that you are currently working, well, the volunteers are actually working in 9 of the 10 regions in Guyana, so you're not in Region 7. What is happening in these 9 regions?
Those are the 9 regions that we have been in since working in Guyana.
Okay.
And in fact, we were here in 1960. Just to back up for a second, we were here from 1966 to 1971, and then again since 1995 through today.
Okay.
And so those are the 9 regions we have been working in. I believe we're in 8 regions at the moment.
So where do you have most of your volunteers concentrated now?
Mostly along the coast.
Along the coast.
We try to reflect the population to some degree. There are several considerations in how we, determine what sites to go to. But I mean, we have volunteers along the coast anywhere from Mabaruma down to Quarantine, and that's where the vast majority of them are. And some will be in. Well, then you get into like regions 8, Nikedo, region 9. We've had a good presence in. And we're talking about working in either, it can be an urban community, it can be a rural community. Some of the volunteers have all the modern conveniences that other people in their community would have, and others are living on the Pomeroon and get to work by canoe. So it does vary, it covers the spectrum.
They see that as a challenge to bring themselves, leaving the comforts of the U.S., coming here and hanging out in the jungle, so to speak, in some parts?
I think everyone who joins Peace Corps has some idea that it might be an environment like that. I think many people associate Peace Corps with village environments and all. And there are certainly those sites, but there are also needs in urban environments. Around the world, you might have volunteers in capital cities. Well, here we have volunteers in Georgetown, as a matter of fact. So it can range anywhere from a major capital city of the world to the most remote sites imagined, with 200-300 people.
All right, tell me some of the projects you're currently working on right now.
Well, our projects, of course, are education, which and health, and within education, it's literacy training for teachers. It's direct education, literary education for students. And then working with parent-teacher associations to encourage parental involvement, to understand the value of education, to support their kids, not to encourage their kids to come work on the farm, even though that may be an economic necessity. We want them to still realize that, their kids should be pursuing education. Then with health, we work in some areas of maternal, child, and infant health. We work to support the capacity building of some of the NGOs and local institutions. There's a number of things that they're involved in, but it's all within the realms of health and education right now.
Do you work with locals here in a sense that the Peace Corps Guyana, is it solely composed of individuals from the United States, or some from the U.S. and some from Guyana?
The volunteers are only Americans that have come here, but no volunteer. We're always reluctant to talk about a volunteer's activity, because it's not a volunteer's activity. A volunteer is working with a host organization, institution, school, hospital, on their needs. So a volunteer will have a counterpart, they'll have colleagues, and they're working on the projects that those institutions, those hosts, are interested in pursuing. So it's not like a volunteer comes in and just starts to work and does something that they think, oh, well, this is very creative and this is new and this is what's needed. We're there to support. We're there to support the ongoing efforts of
I didn't mean that. I mean, like, when you come to a country, and let's say you brought 25 volunteers from the Peace Corps U.S. into that country, are you then going to try to, and of course you're working with a ministry or whatever,
right,
but do you try to, or do you endeavor to encourage locals to come on board and try to be part of that? Or that is only at the request of the ministry, the respective ministry that you might be working with?
Well, it's whatever the institution that we're working with wants to do. I mean, we do encourage volunteerism at the local level. We encourage youth groups. We encourage people to get involved in building up, supporting their own community, to take an active role. So, yeah, there is an element of that, certainly.
So you share information as to how this can be done and so on?
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, we just recently, well, over the summer, there were several camps in which Peace Corps volunteers participated or helped organize. One was a rather large one that Peace Corps is known for doing around the world, called Camp Glow, which is Girls Leading Our World. It's for the purpose of women's empowerment, girls' empowerment, to let them know that there are no boundaries on what's possible, to know that they can take care of themselves, that they are not subjects, they are not victims, they are half the population, and they have a role in the future and the leadership of this country. So things of that sort where we do and encourage people to take on responsibilities they may not have thought of, frankly, otherwise.
When you look back, and if my math is correct, probably over 50 years this would have been conceptualized, the Peace Corps, that is. When you look back 50 years, how has it grown over those 5 decades?
Well, just in sheer numbers of volunteers, it's grown. I mean, up to 9,000, starting from the first few countries. So,
okay.
And that's 8 to 9,000 is probably where it'll be for a while. I think that times have changed, and the trick for Peace Corps, the real challenge, is to be able to adapt to those changes, to understand how the world is evolving and the needs are evolving, therefore. I mean, we were mentioning earlier about technology and communication. Some of the most remote spots on Earth now have access to information that they would not have 50 years ago. There's a greater sharing of information. There's a lot more organization of civil society and NGOs assisting communities than there were 50 years ago, and they bring all the technical expertise as well. So we have to find, well, what is the niche? What can we contribute? What can the volunteers contribute out there? And so I think the bar is always being raised as societies, as communities become kind of more advanced in the information that they have. It encourages us to train volunteers to a much higher skill level, and to bring new ideas, bring ideas that have been tested around the world into new communities.
So is it fair to say then, as the world change, it brings new challenges to the Peace Corps?
Yeah, absolutely. And when we look at the future of Peace Corps, we're always looking with that in mind and saying, well, what is communication going to be? Who all is going to have laptops? Who's going to have internet? Who's going to have support from governments that they might not have had in the past if they're living in a very remote area? So we realize that times are changing. We're always trying to figure out how best to adapt to those changing needs.
While the world has changed and the Peace Corps has learned to adapt to all of those changes, you've stuck steadfastly to the original mandate as articulated by the late President John F. Kennedy?
It is basically unchanged in those 50 years, and there are not many institutions that can say that, and not many that probably should say that. I mean, you want institutions to change with the times, but the mission and the goals were broad enough and of such gravity that I think they're still as pertinent today as they ever were. So we still can work within the original framework without changing any of that.
Have any other country, or has any other country around the world tried to pattern the Peace Corps US and try to have their own? Have you seen that?
I have. I couldn't give you examples offhand. There are several countries, though, that have had support from Peace Corps for maybe decades, and then their governments decide we're going to now be able to start our own version of public service based on that model. And they'll have whatever is appropriate to that context of that country and culture. But yes, several have expressed the idea to do that. And of course there are other organizations such as VSO that have, I mean, they predate us in Guyana, as a matter of fact, who have volunteers around. So we're always working and collaborating with everybody to make sure we're all clear of who's doing what, where, and why.
How big is it a challenge for you as country director to manage the Peace Corps leg here in Guyana?
It's a challenge. You have to be a little bit of a jack of all trades. We work with a very professional, very experienced professional and enthusiastic staff. I'm very proud to work with them that are here in our Georgetown office. Our whole purpose is to support the volunteers and make it possible for those volunteers to be in the field. So we're taking care of, providing all of their needs, medical, safety, programmatic, whatever information they need to be able, and training to do their jobs effectively. And then to manage the volunteers, well, they are volunteers. They're not employees. That's a little different. But what you have are the volunteers who are so dedicated and committed to the cause of being here and to the organizations they work with that they're almost to a person always quite serious about their work. And it's something that you can't force people to be enthusiastic. You can't force dedication and commitment. That's something they come with. That's something that's in them that makes them special and unique. Not every person in the U.S. wants to be a volunteer, could be a volunteer. It ends up being a very select few who have all the characteristics to be able to be successful, to achieve here, and to have a really positive experience for themselves and for their community and for their host organization.
When we say volunteer, it connotes that everything is basically free. There's services and everything that they're doing. They're volunteering. Right. They're giving their time free and all of that. They're here in a different country. You're there in 75 countries around the world. Is it totally free, or in some way they get some kind of an allowance to allow them to, to get along in the countries that they are in?
They receive nothing from their host organization they work with to begin with, so there's nothing of that sort. They're given an allowance, a meager allowance that allows them to survive, to be healthy, to pay for rent, to pay for food, for transportation, the very basics and essentials of life. What we expect, though, is that the volunteers are going to live at the standard of the local community in which they're in. And that's very important to us, because for a volunteer to be effective, they have to be accepted as part of that community. They have to assimilate. They have to really become a contributing member, sharing the concerns and the successes of that community. There's a trust that has to be built there. So part of that is living at that similar standard.
And therein lies some challenges too for the individual sometimes.
In what way? There are challenges based on that. But the volunteers, that's what they expect. That's what they understand is necessary, and they don't want to separate themselves from the community. They tend to become extremely close. Many return. We have some that I've seen lately that are working locally. A man walked into our office, in fact, just a few months ago, that was from the very first group of volunteers in 1966. He was a teacher in Lethem. At St. Ignatius School, as a matter of fact, where at the time there were 25 students, and now there's like 400. So he's seen some things change, but it was interesting to hear the observations of someone who'd been here 45 years prior, and yet he could understand the experience that the volunteers now go through, and they'd be able to understand his stories as if they were being written by a volunteer today.
Wonderful stories. I wish we had more time, but that's all the time we have here in our program. Mr. Brannon Brewer, Country Director, Peace Corps Guyana, I want to thank you very much for sparing some time to pop in here on The Fact, and I wish you all the best in your endeavors here in Guyana.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Coming up next, I'll be talking to Terry Gadraj. Stay tuned.